Hey there, deep divers. Ready for a trip to Kenya?
I'm ready. Always up for a deep dive.
Awesome. Today we're tackling Mpesa, or Mpisu if we're being proper about it.
Love it. Them Kesa. Such a fascinating case study. It's way more than just paying for your coffee with your phone.
Right. We're talking full-blown financial revolution, and it's spread way beyond Kenya at this point. But let's back up for a sec. For listeners who might not be totally familiar, what exactly is M-Pesa?
Okay, so picture this. Your phone is your bank. That's the basic idea behind M-Pesa.
I like it already. Simple.
Great. It lets people store and transfer money, pay bills, all kinds of stuff, just using their phones. No need for a traditional bank account.
Super convenient. So where did this all start?
Kenya, back in 2005, the brainchild of Safaricom, a Kenyan telecom company. Launched in 2007.
It's interesting. So they were already in the mobile world, but then jumped into finance.
Exactly. But getting there wasn't a walk in the park, that's for sure. Regulations, security concerns, convincing people to trust this whole new system.
Sounds like a lot of hurdles to clear. So how did they even come up with the idea in the first place?
This is the cool part. They noticed people were already using airtime as a kind of informal currency.
Airtime, like minutes on your phone.
Yep. People were transferring airtime between phones to settle debts, make payments. It was already happening organically.
Makes sense. Kind of a barter system, but with minutes.
Right. So Safaricom thought, hey, why not formalize this? And bam, the seed for M-Pesa was planted.
I love those aha moments. But turning that aha into a real working system, that must have taken some serious work.
Oh, for sure. It was a team effort.
Like who else was involved?
So Safaricom had to work hand in hand with the Kenyan government.
I bet the regulators had a thing or two to say about this.
You bet they did. We're talking the Central Bank of Kenya, the Communications Commission of Kenya, we call that the CCK for short, even the Ministry of Finance. Everybody had a stake in this.
So they couldn't just launch this thing willy-nilly.
No way. Lots of hoops to jump through. First, they had to prove the system was secure. Imagine the chaos if someone hacked it and stole everyone's money.
Yeah, nightmare scenario. The security was a top priority. What else?
Well, there was this whole legal question. Could Safaricom, a telecom company, actually operate something that looked a lot like a bank? That was a big debate.
Okay, that's interesting. Blurring the lines between telecom and finance. So how did they convince everyone this was legit?
A lot of back and forth, that's for sure. Negotiations, presentations, demonstrating how M-Pesa would benefit everyone. It was a process.
Sounds intense. So they were navigating the tech challenges, the legal stuff, but what about the people? Were Kenyans on board with this whole mobile money idea?
That was another hurdle, for sure, especially those who'd never had a traditional bank account. There was this trust issue. Can we really trust this thing with our money?
I get it. It's a big leap of faith. So how do they tackle that?
Well, they knew they couldn't just focus on the tech. It had to be user-friendly, simple, accessible, something everyone could understand.
Smart move. Make it easy for people to use.
Exactly. They designed a super simple text-based interface. Worked even on basic phones. No fancy smartphones needed.
Brilliant. That opens it up to so many more people.
Right. And then there's the agent network.
Agents. What do you mean by that?
Basically, they partnered with local shops all over Kenya. These shops became M-Pesa agents. People could go there to deposit or withdraw cash, get help with the service.
That's clever. A human touch, someone you can talk to, builds trust.
Exactly. It made M-Pesa accessible even in rural areas without bank branches.
So they were tackling the tech side, the trust issue, working with the government. Did the Kenyan government have any specific rules or regulations in place for M-Pesa?
That's where things get interesting. Initially, the Kenyan government took kind of a hands-off approach.
Really? Why is that?
Well, they saw the potential of M-Pesa to boost financial inclusion, bring more people into the formal economy. They didn't want to stifle innovation with too many rules right off the bat.
So they gave them some breathing room to figure things out.
Exactly. Safaricom got this special license that gave them more freedom than traditional banks.
A little let's see how this plays out kind of vibe.
You got it. But of course, this light touch regulation wasn't without its critics. Some people started raising concerns as M-Pesa grew rapidly and became a bigger part of the economy.
I bet. What were they worried about?
Well, what if the system crashed? What about consumer protection? Who was really in charge here? These questions started popping up.
Makes sense. It's like that classic dilemma of balancing innovation with the need for safeguards. So how did the Kenyan government respond to these concerns?
Well, They didn't slam on the brakes, but they definitely started thinking about a more robust regulatory framework.
Makes sense. So it wasn't just about regulating M-Pesa itself anymore, but also figuring out where it fit within the larger financial system.
Exactly. And that's where we run into this big question. Should M-Pesa be allowed to stay under Safaricom, a massive telecom company? Or should they be forced to separate?
Ooh, now that's a juicy question. Why would anyone even suggest splitting them up? They seem to be doing all right together.
Right. Well, that's what we're going to delve into next.
All right, deep divers, stay tuned because we're diving deeper into M-Pesa right after this. We'll unpack the debate about splitting Safaricom and M-Pesa and explore how M-Pesa is doing in other parts of the world. It's going to be a fascinating ride. All right, so we're back and ready to tackle this whole splitting up Safaricom and M-Pesa thing.
Yeah, this is where things get kind of tricky.
Lay it on us. What are the arguments for keeping them together versus breaking them apart?
Well, if you look at the separation side, the biggest worry is competition.
Okay, so if Safaricom is already huge in the telecom world,
Right.
and then they also control M-Pesa, the biggest mobile money player,
Yeah, that's a lot of power in one company's hands.
it does kind of sound like they'd have a monopoly. So what would that mean for everyday Kenyans?
Think of it like this. Imagine there's only one store in town selling bread.
Okay, I'm with you. Bread monopoly.
That store can charge whatever they want for that loaf, right? No competition.
Makes sense. So with M-Pesa, if there's no competition, they could raise prices and people would be stuck.
Exactly. And there'd be less pressure on them to innovate and offer better services.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to be stuck with a clunky, expensive system just because there's no other option.
Right. Competition keeps everyone on their toes, keeps prices down, services improving.
So, for the sake of argument, let's say we split them up. What's the downside? Why would Safaricom be against this?
Well, Safaricom's main point is that splitting would actually hurt innovation.
Huh. Interesting. How so?
They say the success of M-Pesa comes from this tight connection between their telecom expertise and their financial services arm.
Like, they work well together because they're under the same roof.
Right. They argue that separating them would be like ripping the engine out of a perfectly good car. You might still have a car, but it's not going to go anywhere.
Okay, I see their point. So it's like this balancing act. On one hand, competition is good, but on the other, disrupting a working system could backfire.
Exactly. And that's why regulators have such a tough job. They have to weigh all these factors and figure out what's best for everyone.
No easy answers. So tell me, what did Kenya ultimately decide to do? Did they split Safaricom and M-Pesa?
Drumroll, please. They did not. At least not yet. There was this proposed amendment to the Kenya Information and Communications Act. It would have forced the separation, but it didn't get enough support.
So they decided to stick with the status quo for now.
For now, yeah. But the debate's not over. It's going to keep coming up as M-Pesa keeps growing and changing.
Makes sense. Speaking of growing, M-Pesa isn't just a Kenyan thing anymore, is it?
Nope, it's gone international, bringing mobile money to other parts of Africa and even beyond.
Wow, going global. But I bet that comes with a whole new set of challenges, right? Each country has its own rules and regulations.
Oh, absolutely. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. What works in Kenya might not fly somewhere else.
Give us some examples. How has M-Pesa adapted to these different landscapes?
Okay, let's hop over to South Africa.
Okay, South Africa.
Their telecom scene is pretty different. They've got a strong regulator called ICASA, the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa.
Catchy acronym. What do they focus on?
Consumer protection and fair competition. They're all about making sure the market is level and customers are treated right.
Sounds like a tough crowd for M-Pesa to break into.
Yeah, they definitely had to play by a stricter set of rules in South Africa than they were used to in Kenya.
So it wasn't just a copy-paste of the Kenyan model.
Nope, they had to adapt and adjust to the South African context.
Makes sense. Flexibility is key. What about other countries? Any other interesting cases?
Let's look at Namibia. Their regulator, the Namibian Communications Commission, or NCC.
Another acronym. I'm sensing a theme here.
Right. Well, the NCC is also really big on preventing those big companies from muscling out the smaller ones.
So, similar to South Africa, they're trying to create a fair playing field for everyone.
Exactly. They want to see healthy competition in the telecom and mobile money space.
I'm guessing there are some countries where things are totally different, though.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's jump over to Nigeria.
Okay, Nigeria. What's different there?
Well, their regulator, the Nigerian Communications Commission, NCC, has a lot on their plate.
More than just regulating mobile money.
Yeah. They oversee the quality of telecom services, NND. They manage this thing called the Universal Service Fund.
Universal Service Fund. What's that all about?
It's all about making sure everyone has access to affordable communication, even in those far-flung corners of the country.
Oh, that's cool. So they're really focused on closing the digital divide.
Exactly. It's about balancing those different priorities, access, affordability, and making sure the market is healthy.
So it sounds like there's no one right way to regulate mobile money. Each country have to find its own path.
Exactly. Each country has its own unique situation, its own economic realities, social factors, technological landscape. What works in one place might not work in another.
It's like a global puzzle, with each country trying to find the right pieces to fit their picture. But that brings us to another big question. With all these different approaches out there, what can the rest of the world learn from Kenya's journey with M-Pesa?
That's the million-dollar question. And that's what we're going to unpack in our final segment.
All right, deep divers, we're back for our final push into the world of M-Pesa. We've seen how it started, how it's regulated, how it's gone global. Now the big question. What can the rest of the world learn from Kenya's experience? What are the takeaways here?
Ooh, that's a good one. Well, I think first and foremost, it shows the power of thinking differently. M-Pesa didn't try to copy the traditional banks,
Or it's like, let's just reinvent this whole thing.
Exactly. They found a brand new way to connect people with financial services. And they used something everyone already had, their phones.
So simple, yet so revolutionary. But I'm guessing it wasn't all smooth sailing, right?
Yeah.
What were some of the roadblocks they hit along the way?
Trust was a big one. Huge. Convincing people who'd never had a bank account to trust this new mobile money thing, that was a challenge.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a big ask. Hey, put your hard-earned money in the system you've never used before.
Exactly. So they had to make it super user-friendly, accessible, human-centered.
So it's not just about the technology itself, but how people actually interact with it.
Right. They created a system that was easy to understand even for people who weren't tech-savvy or maybe couldn't read well.
Smart move. You're excluding a lot of people if you make it too complicated.
Exactly. And then there was the agent network. Remember we talked about that?
Yeah, those local shops acting as M-Pesa points.
Right. That gave M-Pesa a physical presence in communities. People could talk to a real person, get help. It built trust.
So it wasn't just this faceless tech thing. There was a human element to it.
Exactly. And they focused on solving real problems, like making it easier to send money to family in rural areas or pay for stuff without carrying cash. Stuff that mattered to people.
It was about meeting people where they were at, addressing their actual needs. That's smart.
Right. But the regulatory side is also interesting. Do you remember how the Kenyan government took that kind of hands-off approach in the beginning?
Yeah, they were pretty relaxed about it, weren't they?
They were, and I think that was crucial to M-Pesa's early success. It gave them room to experiment, to innovate, to figure things out as they went along.
It's like sometimes you need to let things breathe a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Not over-regulate right out of the gate.
Totally. But of course, that flexibility also came with some worries, like, what if the system goes belly up? What about protecting consumers?
The classic balancing act. Innovation versus security. So what's the secret sauce? How do other countries strike that balance?
Well, there's no one magic formula, but Kenya offers some good lessons. First, you need a regulatory environment that's flexible, open to new ideas.
So don't be afraid to let people try new things.
Exactly. But at the same time, you need those safeguards. Consumer protection, financial stability. You can't just let things run wild.
It's like building a playground with guardrails. You want kids to be able to have fun, but you also don't want them getting hurt.
Perfect analogy. And the second lesson, collaboration is key. Regulators, industry, consumer groups, everyone needs to be talking to each other.
So don't operate in silos. Work together to find solutions.
Exactly. Now, this brings us back to that big question we keep dancing around. Should Safaricom and M-Pesa stay together, or should they split?
The million-dollar question. So remind us again, what are the arguments on both sides?
Okay, so those who say split them up, their big worry is about one company having too much power.
Dominating the market, stifling competition, that kind of thing.
Exactly. They argue that giving one company that much control could end up hurting consumers in the long run. Less choice, higher prices.
The too big to fail problem. But what about the other side? Why keep them together?
Well, Safaricom argues that splitting would actually harm the very thing that made M-Pesa successful in the first place. That close connection between their telecom knowledge and their financial services.
It's like a delicate ecosystem.
Yeah.
Mess with one part and the whole thing could suffer.
That's a great way to put it. It's a tough decision, no doubt. And there are valid points on both sides.
So what's the takeaway for other countries watching this unfold?
I think the big lesson here is that regulations need to evolve along with technology. What worked 5 years ago might not be the best approach today. You got to stay adaptable.
Be ready to change with the times.
Exactly. But this isn't just about policy wonks and regulators. This M-Pesa story, it's got something for everyone.
Right. What would you say to our listeners who are just everyday people? Why should they care about all this?
Because M-Pesa is a powerful example of how technology can be a force for good. It's about financial inclusion, giving people more control over their money, empowering individuals.
It shows that innovation can come from anywhere, and even small ideas can have a huge impact.
Couldn't have said it better myself. The M-Pesa story is still being written. It'll be fascinating to see what the next chapter holds.
Absolutely. And on that note, deep divers, we've reached the end of our Mpesa journey. We hope you've enjoyed the ride. Keep those brains buzzing, those curiosity gears turning, and those deep dives going. Until next time.